Watercolor Simplified. And this is something new that we're trying to give, members a more, a 2-hour session of teaching rather than like a full day of workshop. We've had a lot of requests for that. So John has graciously, and as a great teacher, provided us with that. So it begins, it's called Watercolor Simplified. As I said, it begins on Thursday, April 8th, and it's going to be online via Zoom from 5 to 7 p.m. for the first 4 weeks. For the students that do sign up and attend, we will take a poll and see how that time is working, and if we need to adjust it or put it more in the daytime, that's something that can be discussed. Sessions are going to be recorded and available. We're not going to put a limit on them. So for the students who attend, they will have those sessions to view later. And currently we still have a few spots available. So John has a degree in graphics design, and but upon retirement, he began, doing a little bit of watercolor and taking watercolor workshops, as many of us do, to learn all about it. He's had many artists who've influenced him, and he'll probably talk more about that. Some of them, Frank Francesi, Robert Burridge, and others. And John just has a great compositional style in his paintings. They're very colorful. He hadn't planned on teaching, but he was invited to teach a watercolor class some years back, and he'll tell you more about that as well. But he jumped in with both feet. And because he's got such a wonderful style and method of teaching, and he's funny and talkative, students get very comfortable with him. His classes are always filled up. So with that said, he also, oh, by the way, he was the president of the Los Gatos Art Association from 2017 to 2019, and then stepped away from that after doing his bit. We all know how that goes. So welcome, John, and he's going to talk more about his class, his teaching style, and you'll get to see his great sense of humor with us. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. I want to thank Susan. I want to thank the Watercolor Society for having me. It's a big honor. I have to think a really big honor, because I've attended more workshops through this organization than I can count on my fingers. So it's a big deal for me to be here, and I really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome. We're glad to have you. Oh, did John just get muted?
John, you're muted.
John, you got muted somehow.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry. I was thanking everybody for giving up one of the nicest afternoons we've had all year to come inside and Zoom and listen to me or watch me. I'm going to go over a few before I get to painting. That'll come. I want to talk a little bit about me, who I am, my art background. I want to talk a little bit about my style of painting. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about teaching and what you might expect from the class that I'm going to be doing. So I'll start way back. This is it, because it's a cute story. I like telling it. I remember very distinctly, I grew up in Menlo Park, not too far from Menlo Atherton High School. And there was a family down the street. I was close with this guy. His name was Ed Abity. And he was a number of years older than me, but Ed was a real artist. And as a kid, he sat me down and gave me art lessons. And the first lesson he gave me was on shading things, cylindrical things, vases or cans or whatever. He's the first one that sat me down and said, did you know if you shade this side dark and this side light, it looks round? And that was it. I had just become really interested in art. He also taught me, this was in the, oh God, can I go back that far? 60s, 50s, 60s. He taught me how to take paint by numbers. Anybody remember those? And not follow the lines. You could actually smooth the paint from one color to another without following the edges. So that was my early art interest, the influencer. He went on, by the way, to go to Art Center in LA And the last I heard, ended up in Detroit working on car designs or something. That's what I heard. Anyways, all the way through high school, art was one of the subjects that I did real well. And anybody in that position would think about it as a career. Since I wasn't nearly as good in math and science, I figured I'd go on and work, get a job in art. So I went off to school in the 60s, mid 60s. So mid 60s in colleges had a really interesting impact on me. The first thing I'll relay is in the 60s, in the art world, the art school world, there were two worlds of thought. One was, we'll teach you the techniques. And if you learn the techniques, you can paint anything. That was what they were teaching in the art schools, the Art Center for Design down in LA and all the art schools. This is the word as I got it from a non-art school. They taught technique first. And their theory was, once you learn the technique, you can paint anything. San Jose State, on the other hand, took a different approach. San Jose State taught concept and idea is the big thing. You will learn whatever technique you learn to get that idea out. And that's very significant because people coming out of San Jose were known for their brains and their ideas versus their technique. The fear we learned was, if you learn just a technique, you may never grow. You may just decide, I can paint that Monterey pine so well, I'll never do anything else in my life. That's what we were told. Anyway, so interesting influence. The second big influence from college was a professor whose name was Eric Oback. Eric Oback was a watercolor artist, one of the preeminent artists, watercolor artists in the Bay Area at the time. And he died soon after I took his classes, but he had immediate impact on me as an artist in watercolor. So I wanted to share three things that I remember about him. Number one, the first project, first day, college level art, full-size sheets. And I think they were still 30 by 22 in those days. This was 65, I believe. First projects, a 3-inch brush. He, at the time, by the way, had such a reputation. He had a branded brush. You know how artists do that? This was a Oback brush, 3 inches big. We had to use that if we could afford to get one. Full-size sheet, 3-inch brush, and you could not use any color. These were all plein air. These were all painting outside classes. You could not use any real color. You could not use green for grass or blue for sky or brown for tree trunk. You had to use something other than real colors. That's how I started painting watercolors. That was the first unique thing. He was really into loosening up and not getting terribly concerned about the realities. The second thing he did in 1965-66, he used Elmer's glue with watercolor. And people find this interesting, but I mean, we would buy the largest Elmer glue they had and pour it in the palette next to the colors. And then every time you mixed a color, you mixed a little Elmer's glue with it. It acted pretty much like paint mediums. It was thick and it was white and milky, but when it dried, it was clear as a bell. And he'd do that because it took care of some interesting problems with watercolors. And that is, when the sky was done, nothing was going to mess your sky up. You could go on and paint the other color and it would never impact us. It was kind of the early days of acrylic paints. As acrylics were just coming out at the time. So that was interesting because that's how we learned. The other thing it allowed us to do, and he was really big in this, it allowed you to use things for pigments that you wouldn't expect. You could take a rusted tin can and you could pull that color of rust off and mix it with that Elmer's glue and get a color that nobody offered in a tube. You could get dirt from the ground, and he was renowned for carrying empty jars in his trunk of his car. He would drive up to Auburn. Has anybody ever seen the red earth when you're heading up to Tahoe around Auburn? The dirt's on the side of the road, bright red. He'd get out of his car, throw it in jars, and then he'd come home and crush it so it was, you could make pigment out of it. And he painted with natural pigments most of the time. It was free, and it acted like a tube of paint because you mixed Elmer's glue with it. I remember that. The last thing I remember about Eric Oback was Ulala Berry Pie. He was, all of our classes, I think it was 2 days a week. One day was in class. The other day he would go somewhere to paint plein air. We didn't call it plein air. We just called painting outdoors. And he used to love to go to Capitola, and the little cafe in downtown Capitola used to have Ulala Berry Pie. So we'd go in and get coffee and Ulala Berry Pie, and then we'd go outside and paint. And I remember that to this day. So those were some of the best way to get to know somebody was sitting around a cup of coffee and a piece of Ulala Berry Pie. Anyways, if you ever look him up, I've tried tracking him down, and there's a very little online about him, but he did really, really unique watercolor, kind of stylistic. He was a real big impact, had a real big impact on me. Anyways, those are the things that I remember about college. Now let me get into this graphic design thing. I don't know how many people have a design or illustration background, but I want to kind of mention what kind of influence that has on painting. I spent 40 years in design, most of it at Hewlett-Packard, and most of the time in packaging design. So my responsibility was what the outside of the box looked like. So anybody, well, I left in 2012, but anybody from the 70s to the early 2000s that bought a Hewlett-Packard commercial or what's the other one? Anyways, anybody that bought a computer, consumer or commercial, that was in a box, I had something to do with most of how that box looked. I mean, and that's the way it's done. Is it's what I call design by objective, DBO. You carefully find out what the objectives are for the project you're going to do, and everybody follows those along to the end result. There's a lot of attention given to what that end result's going to be. So as a painter, I found out after I left Hewlett-Packard that doesn't always work in painting, because what happens is if you're always worried about the end product first, things just never seem to work for me. Never, because I was too worried about the perfect end result. So it impacted me because I had to come up with ways to break my natural instincts. So when you talk about people who haven't painted a lot and they grab a paintbrush and the first thing they want to do is put it in their hands and use it like a pen, those are the kind of instincts I had. I wanted everything to be perfect, and I'd spend a lot of time creating this image and drawing it and render it perfectly and then painting it. And then I looked around and I thought what caught my eye was expressionism and brush strokes and splatters. And so it's been a process since I retired, since 2012, to break my tendencies, my natural tendencies of wanting to paint a certain way and trying to loosen up and trying to come up with something that's a little different. Okay, so that's about my background. That's where I came from. I've been painting watercolor more seriously since 2012 to this day. And I'll tell you a bit about my art. I've got some hanging behind me. I don't know how much you can see it. The first thing I'll tell you is I don't have a website, but I do have my paintings online on Instagram. So anybody that's interested in taking a quick peek of the last 10 or 12 years of my artwork, go to Studio Giannotti. One word, Studio Giannotti. You could put a hashtag in to mute. Studio Giannotti, Giannotti. You'll see it says John Kitty Giannotti. That's because it's linked to a Facebook. Kitty is my wife's name. That's not my middle name. So it'll say John Kitty Giannotti, but that site is where my most, well, I might say 99% of the artwork I've done over the last 10 years is in there. take a look at it if you want to see what I've done, because I don't have room to put all of that stuff up. And when a workshop, a demo person comes in, they usually bring work with them and load the room, and I just don't have room to do that. So there's a reference point for you. So my style, I'm still actually developing a style. I prefer having my paintings look like paintings rather than looking like photographs. So I tend to be, I work very hard to be loose. I have a big preference for loud, colorful, noticeable paintings. That's the way I will usually go. Doesn't mean every picture's done that way, but if I have my choice, I'm going to go for something that's going to make it pop. I have this need to think when people see mine with other work that mine will jump out at them, and they'll want to walk up and see why that is. So I don't do a whole lot of work that's soft and calm. I do some, but a lot of it is colorful and bright, and I do that intentionally. Just so you know, what you would not expect, what you won't get in this class is how I paint myself in my studio. I paint with music blaring, very eccentric music. I like Paris street jazz, Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli. I like Hawaiian music, the real old falsetto. I like the blues. I like anything that's got feeling. It really gets me into the mood of painting. So when I paint by myself, it's not a quiet thing. I'm in a small bedroom, which is what, 10 by 12, and I crank up the noise because it just takes everything out of my head except for that sheet of paper and my paints. So that's just my particular style.
Okay, well, Sean, we're anxious to see your style.
Oh, are you ready to get there? Okay. Well, let me just quickly go over how the class works.
Absolutely. So
what I've been doing, I've been teaching since 2013, and I got it started with a working with a group of people at the Terraces Retirement Center in Los Gatos. I actually started there because my daughter, who's an art therapist, was working there, and she got married and got pregnant and decided to give up that gig, but asked me if I'd like to come show them my work. And I had already started painting, and I had taken some of Mike Bailey's classes. So I brought some of that stuff up there and showed them. And they asked me if I'd like to come in and volunteer teach up there, which I did. And I still would be doing it. And a lot of those students are on this Zoom. I stopped because they wouldn't let me in for the last year and a half. So we keep in touch, but I intend fully, once they open up, to go back to that group, because that was kind of my reality check every week, to go in and see the gang that I had painted with for years. And there's some very, very talented people there. But it was really good for me to work with them, to just see how they're doing. I get a great joy out of seeing other people do well. Not so much worried about me, but I really like to work with other people. In my role as president of the Los Gatos Art Association, I got involved with a number of shows at the Jewish Community Center in Los Gatos. And it was at that point where they asked me if I'd be interested in teaching there, because they have a huge program. I don't know if you've ever been there or been involved with that group, but they have a huge program. And I said, sure. So I started teaching there. Okay, I've got a note and I'm trying to read it. Let me read the note. Excuse me. Has shown work up close while we listen. Oh, I've got some work here. You want me to put some?
No, we'll get to that in a minute. Just okay. Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. Let me close that.
Yeah.
I started working there, gosh, maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and teaching. And between the Terraces and teaching this group, I started to teach more and more. For a while, I was teaching 2 classes at the JCC, 10, 15 students a class in a room twice a week. the problem was that the class was designed for 8 people and we had 10 to 15 people in there and we were painting like sardines in a can. It was awkward. When the pandemic hit, they picked it up real quickly with Zoom, and I had never conceived of being able to do painting on a Zoom platform, but we're doing it, and we're doing it quite effectively. And I have to think part of it might be me, but part of it is the fact that people just don't have a whole lot to do during the pandemic, and they were thrilled that something was happening at least one night a week. So I still teach that class. JCC's class goes, right now it's 12 weeks. It's one night a week for 12 weeks in a row. So those people get quite a bit going on rather than 4 weeks. Anyway, here's the way it works. I send out about a week before, 4 to 5 days before we meet. I send everybody that takes this class a photograph, a black and white copy of the photograph, because I'm all about learning values, and it's easier to see values, darks and lights in black and white than it is in color. It helps you determine what's going to be light and what's going to be dark. And I was also asked to do that because a lot of people didn't have printers or didn't want to spend the time printing. And I send a line drawing. So I go ahead and draw or trace the picture and send you a line drawing that you can use to reproduce. So if you take the class, you're going to get the picture and you're going to get a line drawing. It's not a drawing class. I would love to teach one, but if I don't want to get into using most of the class to draw. So I'm providing the drawing. And here's what I tell people to do: to either print it out if you've got a printer, put it up on a window, put your paper over it, you can trace through, put it on a screen of your computer, trace it. If you want to go to I'm painting now on a quarter sheet, which is 11 by 15. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take the 8.5 by 11 image, cut it in half, and I've got the ability to enlarge just to 8.5 by 11, and I enlarge it. It's depending on the painting or your paper, maybe 250, 280% will get you, if you do two each half and then just tape them back together, and it's 11 by 15 sheet, very close. So it's easy to upscale artwork to draw. And last but not least, if you choose to draw something, be my guest. I think that's wonderful. I'm just not forcing anybody to have to draw this stuff. So you will get, I think I have one here to show you that's kind of, yeah, this is it. So this would be one of the things we're going to do. The class wanted some seascape, and they've already done trees, and I include a black and white version because this gives them an idea of where the darks and lights are, and then they get a drawing that they can trace. So part of the trick in doing it this way, I've learned, is that when you use somebody else's drawing, you're not really sure what that drawing is. So it takes a little practice, because I'll make a mark, whether it's a dark area or a light area. You have to be the one to check and decide what's dark and what's light. So it's not the end, it's not an end by itself. You still need to look at the painting or the photo and see what's happening to be able to use that. But that's kind of how the class progresses. And in an hour and a half to 2 hours, I can usually get through maybe half, maybe a little over half of a painting. And then what I would do is I would finish it the next day or the day after and send everybody in the middle of the week my finished piece so they could finish it up on their own. I was telling Susan that since we did that, we've actually changed that, because people wanted to see me finish it. They saw me start, and then I would send them the finished piece, and they were missing whatever I did to do that. So now we're at a point where we're doing phase 1 and the first class, phase 2 and the second one, and I won't touch it in between. I simply take it out on the second one and finish it up in front of their eyes. They called that the magic sauce. They wanted to see the magic sauce. How did I get from step A to step B or C? They want to see. So that's how the class goes. So any questions before I head over to my studio. You can see behind me where all those lights are. I have a camera set up. I'll share the screen and I'm going to go over there and I'm going to start. Let me see if I have a question here.
John, we're just going to ask you questions once you get started. So
Okay.
I
good.
think it's almost 2, so we should probably get you painting.
Okay. So here is, oops, I want to share screen.
Yep.
And I want this to show share. Okay, is everybody seeing that? You should see 3 pairs. Okay, so I'm heading over. I'm leaving this seat and I'm going over to this. Here I am, right here. And I'm going to get started. So as I do this, I have been told by my students that as I paint, they want to know what I'm doing. They want to know why I'm doing it. So I have had to learn a new skill, which is verbalizing what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and then showing them what I'm doing. So it's something new to me. And just so you know, here's my reference image, but I only use this to get a start. It certainly won't look like this when I'm done, because once I get some paint on there, I stop looking at this and I just paint with what I see in front of me. But I like pairs because it's a simple shape and I've painted them a lot. So it's one of my little safety valves. Okay, so let me explain to you my simplifying watercolor concept. Here it is. 3 colors. I'm not going to say, are they? 3 colors, 3 brushes. This is not working. And let me get rid of these.
What are the colors?
Red, yellow, and blue. Your 3 basic colors. And I do this for a good reason. Let me explain while I'm doing this, why I chose this. If anybody's ever taken other workshops, every single artist has their own palette of colors, 10, 12 colors. And I would buy them every time for a workshop. And I got to the point where I had 350 colors because there were 6 different artists I had gone to. And I thought there's no way I'd ever use those. So I have to figure out how to paint simply. And simply is, you don't get a color for everything. Every color I need can be developed with these 3 colors. So that's kind of the principle I'm pushing today. I have 3 brushes. 3 brushes because these are almost the same. I'll make it easier for people. Make it easier for people. How's this? 3 different brushes. Big, medium, and small. So here's the deal. 3 colors, 3 brushes, 3 steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And that means what I'm going to paint first, what I'll paint second, what I'll paint third. And on top of that, I reinforce my easy as 1, 2, 3 with 3 values and 3 shapes. So everybody, not everybody, you may or may not have heard about values, darks and lights, darks, mediums, and lights, or shapes. But 3 is a good number because 1's boring, 2's even, and 3 just works out really well. So I'm going to attempt to do 3 values, a dark, medium, and a light. And I'm going to attempt to do it with 3 brushes, step 1, step 2, step 3. And then I'm going to try to keep this. If you notice from the original concept, I've added a background and shadows. I'm going to employ what I refer to and what other people may refer to as a Rembrandt shading, because Rembrandt developed something. I'll show you real quickly what I'm talking about. I just need to get a marker pen and I'll tell you what I'm talking about before I get going. My handy dandy sketchbook. By the way, I do this stuff for a lot of paintings. I will work on values and direction of light. So I'm going to show you an example of what I'm talking about. I'm looking at a rectangular painting that's got, let's see, there's one pair like this, and I'm not going to get any detail at all. There's one over here like this, and there's one like this. And I have put in a background line because this gives me 1, 2, 3 shapes. Simple. Now I have to figure out what's going to be dark, what's going to be light, and what's going to be medium. And that's not terribly difficult.
John, can
I
you
can
also
do it.
put, John, this is Susan, could you also put the picture, the photo in your screenshot?
Sure.
Thank you.
Does this show up here? Yes. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at this, and I'm going to quickly decide for Rembrandt art, there's always this rule of thumb: dark against light against dark, against light against dark, against light. So this would end up getting lighter over here. And this would have dark on this side. Well, this is the face of the, this will make more sense when you see it in, and then this down here might be a medium. So I don't have my other grays out, but the Rembrandt is dark, light, dark, light, dark, light. You can see that kind of happening here. So that's kind of what I'm after. And you won't notice that till I'm done, because I usually don't do the background until I get near the end. But that's my concept. I want it to pop off the page. This doesn't pop off the page. Background's white, and these are kind of light gray. So that's going to all change. I can do these in colors, and then I'll put this dark background, and you'll see what happens. Okay, so that's all I need. I'll leave that out so you can see what I'm looking at. Let's get started here. When I draw on my paper, the first thing I do before I start to paint is I have a kneaded eraser. I take off a lot of the pencil mark because I don't want it to show too much. So I just start erasing it lightly so I see just enough. So when I put water on here, it'll start doing what I want it to do. And I'm gonna, in this particular case, I'm gonna put some water on it. I don't want to flood it too much, or I might let it dry. But I like the fact that water's in my paper because it won't dry as quick. So by flooding my paper with a little water, I'm just kind of setting it up to put paint on it. But I'm not going to necessarily paint wet on wet. So I don't necessarily want all the colors to blend in. But I do want to get it prepped for accepting paints, and this helps sometimes. So water on the paper, and I don't know if you know this, but you can look at it at an angle and see the reflection of light, and you can tell if you've covered everything or not. If it's shiny, it means it's been wet. If it's dull, it hasn't been wet. And I'm going to kind of let that go. So let me get back to my 3.
John, this is Susan
Yes.
again. Are you going to be painting on an angle? And if yes, what's the degree, or a little bit?
So I bought these things online, and these are risers. I think I bought them at Cheap Joe's. What are they called? Hang on just a second. There's a name on them. I need my glasses. They're called Pad Pucks, P-A-D-P-U-C-K-S. They stack together so I can keep, I think they come in a set of 4. I like to put these down. I like to tilt my surface, and that's because paint moves down. And at least if I do this, I know where the paint's going. If I leave it flat, it may move anywhere it wants. And I'd rather know where my paint's going to be going. So I prefer a gentle slope like this. And this is probably 2 inches That would be my guess off the ground. So it's not a huge slant. It's not vertical, but it's not flat. Okay, so I've got 3 brushes. So I'm going to do 3 steps. And I'm going to make this clear. Okay, I'll let you know. Anyways, this red is a permanent cadmium over there. I'm going to go big brush first. I think I'm going to go internal to my pairs first, not external. And I've got I'm going to use this red, which is kind of an orange red, which is like a cadmium. So I'm going to do some red. And I'm going to, by the way, I keep a paper towels near me. I start to pre-mix some of this. I want a yellow, but I don't want it too lemony. This is kind of a cadmium yellow with a cadmium red. And then I'm going to use just a cobalt blue. So just so you know, if you have cobalt blue, you mix them up, it may or may not look like what I've got. And that's because every brand of blue is going to be a little different. So these are Daniel Smith colors. You may mix a red and yellow and blue and come out with different colors. So I'm going to try to do a pair that's yellow, green, and a pair that's red, yellow, and a pair that's green. So what I'm going to do is I need to mix some of these over here for green. So now I've got green, blue, yellow, and red. And I've got kind of an orange over here. So now I can get going, because now what I'm trying not to do is mix too much in my palette. I want to keep my colors as clean as I can. I also have a water container that has 3 openings. And one is to clean the brush, one is to, I keep it in between, and one is always fresh water. So I clean it off here, I clean it a little bit more here, and then I go in here for fresh water as I'm mixing. And all I'm going to start doing, step 1, is indicating some colors so my brain kind of remembers what's going to be what color. So the green one is going to be down here on the bottom of this. And I'm not going to go for, you notice I'm not holding the brush real close. I'm holding it here. Plopping some paint around there.
John, this
Anything's
is
in it.
Susan. John, this is Susan. Is there any way to
Yeah.
raise your camera so we can see a bit more of your painting in your
Yes.
palette?
Hang tight. Let's see if I can get this to work.
Yeah, perfect.
Oops. Just a minute here.
That's better, but you're missing the bottom of your paper. There.
That worked a little better.
Yeah.
Let me see. Maybe I can move this up a little bit.
They want to see more of your palette, so you need to pull it towards
Oh,
you.
the palette this way.
Yeah,
Oh, I see what they're saying. Okay, hang on.
yeah,
Let's do this.
yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay. You know what I may do here? Hang on just a second. I think if I move this right, I can move this here and see if that shows up. That work a little better? So it's right next to me here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, much better. If you could put the picture on top, that'd be great.
I've got a picture to look at. Do you want to see the picture while I'm doing it?
They always want to see the picture. Thank you, John.
Okay, now
All
we're
right,
set.
good. There you
So
go.
I'm still working with my big brush. I'm leaving the other two. So I'm still on phase one. Now I want to do, let's see, if this one, let's go, that was green. Let's do yellow on this one. So I might want to go into, get back my plain yellow. And I'll add a little. And all I'm going to do is put color where if there's going to be white or light, I'm not going to put any paint in there. I'm just going to, okay. This is all highlight that I'm making up in my head because it's not that much of a highlight, but I want to put it there. And then I'm going to do the red one over here. So this is kind of, again, this one's going to be dark on this side down here. Okay. So you kind of see what's happening here. I'm just giving my eyes a little bit of a reminder of what's just beefed up the green a little bit. And then just because I know that this is going to be a different color, so I'm going to get real, can you see my palette? I'm going to take a little bit of paint from each of the colors, and I'm going to do hopefully kind of a neutral gray to start the background. So because I'm using the same three colors, this gray will relate to all the colors. It's kind of a warm gray, yes. And this will be my, and I'll do a little bit lighter over here. I'm not too worried what happens because that's going to be background. But right away, I start getting a sense for the shape of this picture. And something else has got to go below that, but it's going to be a lot. Let's see, maybe I'll try to make a cooler gray. This one looks pretty warm. Maybe if I put a little more of my blue, I could get a cooler, there we go, kind of a, looks a little bit like this, but that's okay. So this is going to be a little bit, and I might even, I didn't. Sometimes it'll touch some other paints and things will start to spill in, but I'm not terribly worried about that either. This is all gonna, at this point, it's still step 1 out of 3. And I know that that's going to be a different color. So I'm poking out that. Okay, I should not stop talking because oops. That pink was, that yellow was escaping over there, which is fine. I haven't done the shadows or anything, so I'm not terribly worried about anything specific yet. So if you can see, I'll lift it closer. You can see some parts that are bleeding. Doesn't really bother me. Even if I get blossoms in there, doesn't really bother me. I can fix that. Now, here's something that I don't always like to use, but in lieu of being somewhere or having hours and hours, I'm going to use a hair dryer to help me dry this. Otherwise, we could be here for 3 or 4 extra hours.
While John's drawing his painting, does anybody have any questions for John? You can unmute and ask it.
Okay, you may have noticed that I use the back of my hands to check. I don't want to get any of my hand oil on the front. So now that's level 1. What does it look like? So you hardly can see anything on this. I'm going to put this big brush away. I'm going to use brush number 2. Now I'm going to come in and start giving the pears a little more detail. I'm going to leave this pretty much white till the end. I'll put something in there later. But I'm going to come in and I know I want this to be yellow, but I want some parts of it to be a little darker yellow. So I'm gonna come in and start
John, could you put your original, the black and white on there, please?
yes. Oh,
Thanks.
can you see that? Let's see if I can get it clear. Maybe it needs to go over here. Does it show up over there? Okay. So I'm still looking just at dark areas and light areas and smooth out some of that. Again, I'm just giving myself, this one's going to be green, so this one's going to be more red, maybe red-green. So I'll take some of this darker red. This goes over here, kind of comes down. And then this will be darker in here. I'll just soften some of that up. This blue and yellow, little green. Nothing wrong with having a little green with my green, yellow. Green in here. I just want some of these things to start taking shape. I'm going to do some marks to myself for dark spots coming up. This is going to be a dark area in here and around. That's going to be dark in there. This is going to be dark over here. This is going to be dark down in here eventually. So you can see it's kind of it kind of starts to blend in by itself. But it won't be clear until it starts to dry. And I think I'll just keep stepping it drier as we go. This green is not green anymore, it looks blue, so I'm gonna work on that.
John, what is the yellow you're using? I know it's a Daniel Smith.
It's a Hansa, Hansa, which is a little bit redder than a lemon. You know, an azo is real lemon, and a Hansa, excuse me, it's a cadmium yellow. A Hansa's lemon. This is a much it's not as lemony. So down at the bottom here, I'm going to be making this a little bit more green. And it kind of gets less green up at the top. So I'm going to take and make it a little bit yellower on the way up when it hits here. This also has a very subtle shape to the outside of some of this. I'll get that later along the edge. Okay. So red, we're gonna still got a medium-sized brush. The red and the green is gonna make kind of a brown. I'm gonna give this one kind of the beginnings to a darker shape. This one's going to have a little bit. I'm layering colors as I go. If you can tell, glazing just one color over the next, adding a little interest. I notice here there's kind of a yellow area over there. So I'm going to take my yellows, and I'm still just using 3 colors. So this is kind of got a yellow, and then there's some green in there, but I'll just fill it in here. This has got darks. This has got some yellow up here, which I kind of like. This has kind of got bits and pieces of yellow over here with some green. this, what I did not get back there was this background, which, okay, we'll get that in a second. Okay, so that's the beginnings. This, I sometimes paint a little fast for people, so I try to slow it down. I can get this part. Okay, so now I'm going to jump a little bit ahead. Maybe I better dry this because when I put the back on, stay with this big one. Now, I'm going to use the same colors, but I'm going to beef them up with the amount of pigment that I use because I want to get some deeper, richer colors for the background. So it's going to be a lot of pigment, a lot of blue, a lot of red. This kind of comes out with a brown. Maybe let's go cooler, kind of a, there we go. This is what I wanted. This is kind of what I was intending. As I move this around, I'm going to add a little darker. I put a little blue in it, same three colors, but I want some interest up here. So I'm adding some blue. I can either, and I can put some red in there. I don't know if you're seeing what's going on here, but I'm just playing with other colors in there. I'm going to turn this now. You can still see that, yes, because I can get around the other side of the picture better. And I'm going to come in here. Now, as I get around the corner, add a little blue. I'm going to lighten up on this a little bit as we get off into the light side, because Rembrandt, dark light, dark light. This needs to start lightening up. Don't worry about the background right now because it can get much darker. But you can start to see what's happening here. And I need to refine this a little bit better over here. And I will eventually possibly even go in here with darker colors as we move on. But already you can see the difference between having this and not having this. So now, as this starts to dry, I'm going to go back in Maybe with the small brush. We'll see if it's time for the small brush. Okay. I'll stay with this medium-sized brush for now. And I'll show you where the other one's going to go later. So I'm going to come down in this area. Now I need some dark colors, which I'm going to work with yellow. So it's kind of a dark green that I need down there. This is going to be a, let's see, dark enough? Maybe not. Got some interest there. Now I'm going to get some of the reddish. Try to get some more darks in here. This is going to have a little bit more oomph. Kind of, let's mix a little blue in there. Okay, I'm just developing little interests on the surface of these pairs because I'm looking into the photo. By the way, look, I don't know if you know what happens if you drop water on a Xerox copy, you're going to see funny, funky things. Anyway, so this is kind of all I'm looking at. I'm looking for darks and lights, and some of these darks, blue. Okay, now what I'm looking at is I'm seeing things up here that are a little more red. So there's kind of some interesting stuff that happens. And this, there's kind of a brown up there, which is blue, green, and red orange. So this is more of a brown look here. So this is a technique to remove pigment. You just wet your brush and pull it. I want a highlight coming down the front of that, and there's kind of a highlight up here. I'm going to pull some pigment off there, make it a little bit brighter. That can be done with the smaller things. So I think I need to make the foreground a little more interesting before I put some finishing touches. So let's go with this. Can you see down here where I'm mixing things from my palette? I just want to get some kind of neutral, but a little bit darker than what I have here. As long as it's different value than what's above it, I'm good. And I'm going to make this interesting down here. I'm not going to try to, and then I'll put some yellow in part of it because it'll make it look interesting. I just, oops, that's a little bit too yellow for the brown. This background stuff I just like to play with. I just want it to be interesting because the pears are just kind of pears. That, throw some of this in here. That'll be darker in a minute. Just get some things going on out here. Quick. Okay, so if you remember the theory, it's starting to look like pears. Dark, light, dark, light, dark, light. That's what I'm doing. I'm following that. I'm going to dry it one more time, and then I'm going to go in. So this is the fun part. I'm still in step 2, medium brush. Now I'm going to get bolder. Just making it interesting, not anymore looking too much at the painting, just trying to pick up on where there might be some brighter colors to make it interesting. This needs to be toned down, so I'm just grabbing kind of a gray green because I don't want it white. I can just cover that. This green, adding a little green to that one. Okay. Now, just to finish this off, I'll show you what I would do. Oh, there we go. That's what I was looking for. Now we're talking dark. Now, dark is a not just colors mixed, but the amount of pigment you put in. So look at the difference, same colors, but look at you'll notice the difference in depth by how much pigment I mixed with my water. Okay, I'm gonna just kind of see the difference. See how that pops? Yep, it's working. Now what I like to do is, as I'm heading out in that world of dark, I like to change it up a bit. So I go from a dark blue to a little bit of red. I just like it to pick up on all the colors. That's the whole idea. Is I've got three colors here, and I want to make sure they all look like they belong. So I kind of, now I'm going to put some yellow up there because yellow is in a lot of the colors too. And I'm going to want it to lighten up over there. So I can end up putting, pure chunks of red. So that's essentially phase 2. I'm just going to kind of indicate this quickly. I probably something's going on up there. Maybe I'll get that line straightened out just a tad. Okay. Now, before I even do anything, I think this might be too light. So I'm gonna, because I've darkened this up, this could go a lot. I think I'll darken it over here and have it go to light over here, the bottom of the table. And it's kind of a blue. Let's see what happens. Maybe I can make it a purple, a light. Let's see if this works. It's got to be lighter than that stuff at the top. Okay. That's kind of nice. I just want some interest down here. I don't want to go crazy yet. There may be some just brush strokes and shapes, and it's wet, so it'll kind of form its own directions.
John,
and
this
there's
is
some
Susan. When you just put that dark in underneath the lowest pair, that really popped it out.
Yeah, well, the whole trick with backgrounds is you can, anything you put darker is gonna pop whatever it is forward. And then this isn't even the end. This is just still the middle part. The end is when you take the darkest you can get in the smallest little sections for detail. So I can pop out I'll show you how I'll pop out what do you call those little, the stems and the seeds and all that stuff is just done. But right now I'm just kind of looking for some kind of shapes for the foreground because it was looking a little light. So this part is, I can go back day after day and keep adding to the background. Once it's dry, you can just keep playing with it to make it interesting, foreground or background. Right now, I'm just trying to neutralize everything a bit because I know I can come back to that. So if I clean this up, and then I'll show you with the small brush what I mean by the final details. Okay, I will jump ahead just a tad. Smaller brush. Can you still hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, I just heard something that made it sound like I was disappearing or something. Okay, so I've got a little teeny brush and I'm gonna go in now and I'm gonna try to catch some of this some of the detail on this. And this is kind of darker in there. I'm gonna just hit little areas that will help tell the story. And then, and again, all just 3 colors. Just pick up a little bit of shadows that are underneath. And I'm just going into doing just tad more. And then what I may do, this, as I see it in the picture, I don't know if everybody else does, but there's a whole bunch of okay, three brushes, 3 steps, and I'm gonna show you some things that I like to do to finish. Here's my, there it is, that I do sometimes just to make it look interesting. I'm gonna remove some paint. You may say, why do you do this? Because I don't want it to look too photographic. I'm actually adding something to the background to make it look different. I'm kind of going to places and tying the image to the background with something unique. These kind of remind me of like little confettis that you throw on a. Can anybody see that close up? What I'm doing?
Yes.
Removing paint. It's just kind of a little trademark of mine. This looks like it's a little light. Now I can evaluate the whole thing and say this could use a little warmth. Maybe that could too. Maybe this could use a kind of a warmth on that side. And that side. Instead of white, little yellow popping out. And if you go in on top of dry paint with a lot of pigment, you can sometimes, what should I do to this little stem down here? Add a little oomph to those. I think I might, I'm getting close, but I always do this. I look at places where I might continue to pop. And then lighten these up as they come off, but they're still darker than what's up there now. And just make it interesting. I'm just looking at, making something interesting back there instead of plain old. So there, let's do that. Okay, how does that look? I think I would say in my scheme, this is pretty much done. Now, I have a huge palette, and I can go back in and add colors that that I can't make. Let's see, in this.
Well, John, this
That
is
mix.
Susan. This is Susan. I think it looks
Yeah.
awesome. And to be honest, I was worried that you wouldn't finish, but you have. And
Yeah, voila.
you paint fast. It looks great. Does anybody have any questions for John?
Yes, please.
I don't have any questions. This is Vicki Wilson, but I think it looks fantastic.
Wonderful. It actually looks, sometimes it looks better online than it does in real life, but it's hard to tell. But again, what I'm trying to get across is 3 colors. That's all. And it's kind of, when you have tons of colors to choose from, it's hard to teach yourself just to use the same 3 colors. And when they're all in the palette, you get a little of each color every time you use it. I prefer that to what I call color book painting. You get an orange for orange and a brown for brown and a green for green, and it looks colorful, but they don't relate. This way, you kind of ensure that they all relate because they all come from the same 3 colors. I can see right now, a wet piece, meaning the first 24 hours, it'll dry significantly lighter than what you are seeing. So I think tomorrow I'll probably go in and add a lot more red, brighter red, but it just doesn't show up right now. So there's a little bit of oomph that I can still add to it, but right now it's wet and you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? This is,
Yes, I was wondering, you mentioned 3 steps.
yeah.
And I was wondering, do those correspond to the size of the brush or the
Yes,
painting
exactly,
light
yes.
to dark, or?
Now that's what I was talking about was I did step 1 with the big brush, which was the light background. Step 2 was the middle ground and the middle colors. And step 3 was the little detail. And that all was dependent on the brush. So yeah, what I'm talking about in the 3 steps is large brush, medium brush, small brush, light backgrounds, color shapes, medium information or a little bit of detail, and then the small brush for all the exacting details. That's kind of the process that I'm teaching, to kind of simplify it. Otherwise, what happens is people in watercolor tend to want to go to step 3 right away. And it's hard to recover. It can be done, but it's hard to recover. If you go slowly, you noticed how I built up from very, very light shades to darker and darker shades. And the blue that I chose is not the greatest dark blue. So my darks are a fraction of what I would normally put in there. I like to use indigo, which is like almost a black blue. But in this case, I was able to get kind of what I was after pretty quickly, pretty efficiently without having to use my complete palette. There's also the opportunity to go back and when you're done with white, which I hate doing, but I will do if I think it's going to improve the picture. And I don't use gouache. I use, what's it called? Bleed proof, little teeny white jar of bleed proof white, best white paint they ever made. And I can come back into this tomorrow and put white anywhere I want and it'll cover everything and stand out like a white reflection.
That's very awesome. Yeah, I think isn't it like Doc Martin bleed proof or something?
Yes, it is. It's Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white. They even sell it at Michael's.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Maybe everybody's anxious to get out into the sun.
Could be.
No, I had questions once you were doing the demo, but pretty much like 30 seconds afterwards, you answered them. So
Good.
All right. Well,
and
again,
I signed up for the class, so I'm looking forward to try it.
Good, Maggie. Good for you. I'm thrilled.
awesome.
Good.
I
I hope others are encouraged to sign up for the class too. It starts on April 8th. It's going to be on Thursday evenings from 5 to 7, and it will be recorded so that if you miss a class, you can go back to it. But it looks like it's going to be a great class.
I'm
Join
signed
us.
I'm excited. And we only have 4, it's a series of 4. So what I'm going to attempt to do is in 2 hours, have everybody complete, or at least almost complete, their paintings. And I think you can see, I think I did that in at less than 2 hours.
Well, yeah, we're only at
So-
3 o'clock. So yeah, you
Yeah.
did that very
So
fast.
I mean, I paint fast, but to me, there's no reason to go slow. It's watercolor. By the way, the reason I like watercolors is I'm not real patient. So when I paint, I want to paint. And if it doesn't work, I want to paint again. I hate for oils, the 2 weeks drying time and scrape it and start again. This is what it's taught me, is do it and do it quickly. If it doesn't work, just do another one. It's just paper. We've heard
Yeah.
instructors say that. It's just paint and paper. So
Right.
do it. So I kind of move quickly. I also, by the way, will let it sit overnight, take my eyes off it, and tomorrow I'll see it and I may do some significant things to it. But if I do that in a class, I usually send that out to you midweek. When I send a new image, I'll say, by the way, here's what I did that you didn't see me do. So at least people will know, interesting. Sometimes I don't put the backgrounds in the first night and people don't know. And then I send it out with a background that didn't exist in the photo. And it just reinforces people to understand you can do, and you own this. You can do anything you want. There are no rules about having to paint exactly what you see. I was painting a black and white picture, making up colors in my head. All I was looking for was a little light. And in this case, by the way, the light is coming from the left-hand corner as you see it and
Yep.
shining. And that Rembrandt is dark light, all the way through the painting. Easy peasy.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Well, if there's no more questions, I think we're going to let John go here. And reminder, thank you so much, John. And if you want to sign up for his class, just go to
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I
You are
enjoyed it.
so welcome. Thank you so much. And everybody, I hope you had a chance. For those who are left, if you get your painting in today, last day to get in for the annual exhibit. So awesome. Thanks, John. Take care.
Thanks.
All
Bye-bye.
Bye.